Inspirational Creatives, episode 173. Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe in iTunes and sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. Rob here, and welcome to this special episode of Inspirational Creatives. This week and next, we're doing something different for the podcast, and that's a rerun of an original episode from some time ago. Last week, it was serial entrepreneur and startup expert Jeff Goldenberg, and this week, I'm rerunning an episode with musician and music producer Bobby Owsinski. There's a variety of reasons I thought this would be a great episode to repeat right now, but one of the main reasons I'm rerunning this particular episode is because I believe that some of the underlying wisdom that Bobby has to offer is universal to this podcast series. We also talk about how to gain confidence as a creative and why Bobby believes it's an exciting time to be part of the music industry. Right now, I'm giving a number of workshops in Oxford, England on creativity, entrepreneurship and audio to students interested in learning how to create a living doing what they love. And this chat is one that's featured heavily in those workshops. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity to share more of what Bobby had to say with you. So with no further ado, on with today's episode. My very special guest today is one of the best-selling authors in the music industry. He's written many of my favourite books in music production, as well as highly respected survival guides for musicians making music in the internet age. He's a guitarist, keyboard player, and sought-after music producer who's worked on more than 100 surround sound music productions. He writes for Forbes, and I know I've only just scratched the surface with this introduction. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Bobby Owsinski. Bobby, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure.
So, Bobby, in your own words, how would you describe what it is you do today?
Well, I'm somewhat of a hybrid. Forbes, when I write for them, describes me as a music category expert. And I guess that's a catch-all phrase that basically means that I do a little bit of everything in the music business, from being occasionally an active musician, producer, mixing engineer, to being an author, to, writing various articles, to consulting, to, a little bit of everything. And it's good because it keeps me busy and it keeps me from getting bored.
Do you enjoy the variety?
Yes, I do. And I think I actually do my best to make it as as different as possible from day to day.
Yeah, great. So what age did you start playing music?
Well, I was somewhat of a professional in that I was making money as a musician when I was 15 years old. By the time I was 16, I was playing 3 nights a week, sometimes 4 nights a week in clubs. And I did that through my high school and college years. And that eventually led to more serious, from being a club musician. And it was easy back then. There were a lot of clubs around, so it wasn't like this was totally unique because there was a lot of people doing it. But you do get your chops together when you do play that much. And then it eventually went to, making records as a musician and then wondering why things worked or why they didn't in the studio and, going from there, wanting to get more studio chops and learning where all the electrons go from, one wire to another. And then, kind of expanding that more into the music business side. So it's been a natural progression from being a player in my young days. And I was always interested in electronics, so I was always studying it kind of on the side. I had electronics books, again, when I was 14, 15 years old, and I was building my own amplifiers and repairing things and all of that when I was young. So I kind of knew how all that worked, and that was it's not something that after a while I enjoyed as much, but it was something that was integral to knowing the real guts of how things work in the music business on a technical level anyway.
So at what point did you know that you wanted to write for the music industry?
Oh, that was sort of a lark. I was on a tour bus and the bass player walked on, and he said, I just got a job writing for the music paper. And the music paper at the time was a music-only paper out of New York. It was kind of the only one, so it was, very high profile. And for some reason, I thought to myself, if he could do that, so can I. So I called up Mix Magazine, and I asked if I could do something. And lo and behold, they assigned me an article to write. And it's funny because I just found it not that long ago, and it was pretty terrible. I was not good in the beginning at all, but it led to more and more of those things where by the time I stopped writing in magazines, I'd probably done 400 or 500 articles in easily a dozen industry magazines of all sorts and types. Mix Magazine, Recording Engineer Producer, which is a great magazine back then, Electronic Musician, Grammy Magazine, Billboard, Variety, you name it. I did something, and I did hundreds of interviews as well, so I kind of got good at that. The way the books came about was kind of something that was selfish on my part. I was a good engineer, and I was getting a lot of engineering work, but I was not a good mixer. I was adequate. I was okay. I just wasn't really good like I had friends that were. And I happened to know all the A-listers. I knew all the best guys because I was interviewing them for various magazines, and we'd become friends. So I thought that I would write a book on mixing because I couldn't find anything, and also because I wanted to get better myself. And I thought, well, if I want to learn this, there's probably a lot of other people that do as well. I wrote my first book on the basis of about 20 or 25 interviews with all the best guys from different genres. I wrote it without a publisher, and I sent it out to 5 different publishers, and all 5 wanted it. And I went with the one that was the most aggressive at the time, who's still my champion in that part of the industry, Mike Lawson, who's just been great, and I thank him every day for giving me kind of a new career. Well, everybody says the same thing. When you do a book, at the end you always say, boy, I'm never going to do that again. And I was no exception. I said that, well, too many brain cells died. I don't think I want to do that again. But the book turned out to be somewhat of a hit. And my publisher kept on saying, well, do another one, do another one, do another one. That led to the Recording Engineer's Handbook, which led to the Mastering Engineer's Handbook. And they began to get easier, and I found a method on how to write that worked and made it go considerably faster and better and more efficiently and everything. And it's something I still use to this day. So, it led to that. From doing that, it led to a lot of consulting. It led to speaking gigs all over the world, really. It led to video courses that I've done, both for my own courses, like 101 Mixing Tricks and things like that, and also for lynda.com. It led to all sorts of different things. So that first book really, opened up a second career that I'm very thankful for, because as much as I like being in the studio, it does burn you out after a while. And I still like being there, but now I can do it on my own terms. I only work on the projects that I want to work on rather than doing it, because you have to make the rent next month or, the mortgage. In a nutshell, that's kind of my story about being an author, being a writer and being an author.
Yeah, I've got your, I think it's the 3rd edition of the Mixing Engineer's Handbook right here, actually. I remember when I first picked it up many years ago, I couldn't put it down. It was just absolutely fascinating, just hearing from some of the best producers in the industry and how they approached their craft. Could you give me some insight as to your writing process? You alluded to it just then. When you started to write more books, you got into some kind of rhythm. You built some kind of momentum. Were there some breakthroughs that you had in terms of the approach that you took towards your writing that helped you to become more prolific?
Yeah, there's one in particular. There's one major breakthrough, and it's a technique that I still use to this day, and I use it on everything. I wish I would have found this much earlier in my life, because I would have been better in everything creative. But this is me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but this is what I do. The first pass, and we'll just talk about writing. The first pass I do, it could be an article, it could be a blog post, it could be, a book, chapter of a book, could be anything. I write totally stream of consciousness. I don't try to make it too perfect. As a matter of fact, I don't worry about anything. I don't worry about anything other than getting the ideas down on paper. So if there's grammar errors, if there's spelling errors, it doesn't matter. The idea on a piece of paper, or in this case on a computer screen, is more important than anything. And that's one of the problems that a lot of creatives have. They expect things to be too perfect too soon, and I was no exception there. Then I do a second pass, and the second pass is refining things. And that's actually putting these ideas into paragraphs, sentences and paragraphs that make sense. It's fixing the grammar. It's correcting the spelling mistakes. And then there's a third pass, and the third pass, and these are all on different days, by the way. There has to be a somewhat of a time period in between, for me anyway. And the third pass is polishing. And that third pass, I'll go back through, and usually I'll find things that I could tweak and fix and make better and make more understandable. I may do a fourth pass or even a fifth pass of refinement. But if I go beyond that, it just gets different. It doesn't get better. So I've learned at that point, I turn it in, if it's to be turned in to someone. And that's become a method, a technique that's worked. I've found it's transportable, again, for me, transportable to just about any kind of creative endeavor. The big thing being, again, like I said in the beginning, most people, especially if you're not used to creating, you expect things to be too perfect too soon. And when it's not, it's very easy to get frustrated. And again, if you take that away, if you say it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't even have to be good, it just has to get your ideas on down, that's far more important, because you'll find that afterwards you'll be able to go through and say, oh, okay, good, that's bad, okay, I can work with this, okay, let's fix it. Because everyone will tell you, no matter what it is, except for the very few geniuses that are out there that can get things the first time, or, when you're hit with that bolt of lightning that happens, a few times in your life. Other than that, creating is hard work. It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of effort. It does take a lot of rewrites, no matter what it is you're writing. If it's a song, if it's a book, if it's, it doesn't matter what it is. It takes time. And most people expect things to be finished too soon. I was no exception, but once I learned that it does take time, if I put the time in, it's going to work out okay, then things definitely got better and got easier, and to the point where now I can crank something out fairly quickly if I had to. And not only that, not only can I crank it out quickly, I can do it on a quality level that I'm sure is as good as anything I've ever done. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to hear that. It strikes me that you're very motivated and you have this ability to keep going. And I sometimes, in my own mind, I relate that to some degree with confidence. Having confidence that you're going to get a good outcome. Because I think where I see people getting stuck creatively is they're not necessarily confident they're going to get a great outcome. They consequently become demotivated. Where did you get your early confidence from so that you could keep going and remain motivated?
It always helps if you have something, if you produce something that someone else likes, preferably a lot of people like. And it doesn't matter, again, what creative endeavor that you're doing. When that happens, that does give you some confidence. I worked on some pretty good things in my life. I most recently had a number 2 record that I produced and mixed just a couple months ago, which was kind of nice. And that always makes you think, okay, it does validate my technique. It validates my tastes. It validates my direction. But on the other hand, if you do something that you worked on pretty hard and you're satisfied with it at the end, that you've done it as good as you can possibly do, or at least, there's always limitations on that, but you've done it to within the parameters that you were given as best as you can do, then, you can walk away with some degree of confidence going, yeah, it was a pretty good product. And even though people didn't get it or they weren't exposed to it or, whatever, there's so many reasons why things aren't hits, so to speak, but you can feel pretty good about it. And again, it's doing the work. None of this stuff is easy, although we all know people that make it seem easy. And we all know people that are so brilliant that they can crank stuff out off the top of their heads so unbelievably fast. But those people aren't human. I mean, they're few and far between. Most of the rest of us, I don't want to say struggle because that's not it, but we do have to work at it, and I'm certainly no exception.
I'm really inspired by that response. It leads me on to a question I'd love to ask you, because I've always been fascinated by your commentary and your writing, and I know you've spoken before about the subtle differences between an art and a craft. Could you describe what those terms mean to you and how an understanding of them can be useful in creative pursuits?
Yeah, I always wondered about this actually myself, and one day it dawned on me. What is the difference between an art and a craft? And really, a craft is what you do for someone else, and an art is what you do for yourself. So, for instance, if you're working on a creative endeavor and it's dictated by someone else, then you're working on that craft. You're developing that craft. So as an engineer, as a studio musician, as a record producer, you're doing your best to make sure that the vision of the artist is output at its most highest level. So that's a craft. There's some art to it because there's certain things you're doing for yourself, but for the most part, it's a craft. Art is something that you're developing for yourself, and you're going, I don't care if anybody else likes this. I'm doing this because this is what I feel right now. This has to come out. And if one person likes it, great. And if nobody else likes it, hey, I'm just fine with it. Many times you find the breakthroughs and what we like to think of as, brilliant new trends come from that perspective where you're not trying to copy the market. You're not trying to copy what someone is telling you should be copying, like record labels do frequently. What you're doing is saying, oh, this is my gut feeling. I really like this, and this is what I'm going to do. Against all odds, against what everyone's telling me, against what the market is telling me, against what the charts are telling me, any of those things. And we very easily get away from that, especially, let's face it, we all want to make money in a creative endeavor that we do. And it's all too easy to follow the trends, to follow the leaders. And there's lots of books, and my books are no exception, that show you how to do that if that's what you really want. But many times, the things that really lead our art forward doesn't happen like that. It comes from, inside. And right now, I'm hopeful that there's someone in some backwoods area somewhere in the world that's creating a new type of music, a new way of doing things, a new sound, only because that's what they feel is the right thing to do. And it's going to take us all by storm, and it's going to change everything in the next few years. I'm hopeful. And sooner or later, that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's exciting to think that. How have you managed to balance that relationship for you as both a producer and a writer in terms of wanting to express yourself, but at the same time remaining sensitive to what your audience would like?
It's gotten more difficult over the years, I have to admit. When I write, I control my destiny, so to speak. It's my creative outlet. It's my art. Publishers don't ask me what to do or tell me what to do. At this point in my life, I've been successful enough that doesn't happen any longer. So, as a result, when I do video courses and things like that, it's all the same. So I'm my own brand, and being that gives you a certain artistic freedom. When I have to put the other hat on and go into the studio as a mixer, as a producer, sometimes it's difficult to check your ego. And the best craftsmen do that so easily. They do it so well. And for me, it's gotten more difficult over the years, I have to say. One of the reasons why I don't take projects anymore unless I really, really, really want to, there's really something special, is because of that. Because I know I have to subjugate my ego, which I don't like to do. I don't think anybody does, really. So if there's something I really, really like, I can do it. And I can say, okay, I understand this is your vision. I'm going to help you as best you can because I think I can help you attain that. And then, I can easily say, okay, this is what you're looking for. You can do X or Y. I'm going to help you get to X or Y, but I think you should go X. But if you think it's Y, that's where we're going. But that's really difficult to do, especially when you have that artistic freedom on one hand and, you take the hat off and you put it on the other one.
Yeah, you alluded to changes and how things have evolved in the industry. How has the industry evolved for you since you first started? And what do you think some of the challenges are today?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm not one of those that long for the good old days on any level, on a technical level, on a business level, on a cultural level. Those days just weren't as good as people seem to remember, in my opinion. I look at music today and the business today, and I look at it with some degree of anticipation. I like where everything is going. I like the evolution, the revolution. I like all of this happening. Change is good. Change is needed in the business. For a long time, it didn't change. It was very static and stagnant. So what we're going through now is something that's terrific, I think. Now, when you look at artists and you look at anybody who's been in the business for a while, publishers, record labels, record execs, older artists, especially in bands, of course, their income streams are changing and how they make money is changing. So they're very resistant to this change. But if you're just coming into the business now, if you're young, it's no different than it ever was. It's the same degree of difficulty. It's not any more or less. It's different. That's it. So that's the way I look at the business today. I look at it as something that's different. It's a different entity, but it's not better or worse. It just is. So I think that, I hope that sort of sets up how I look at these things, because everything changes and it should. So you should learn to roll with it because, hey, it's going to be different tomorrow than it is today. So don't expect it to be any different. And it just so happens that tomorrow gets here a lot faster than it used to. Rob, I'll tell you that it's actually an exciting time to be in the music business. And let's forget about the music for a second, because one of the things that has changed is we haven't seen a real trend, a new trend in music for quite a while. It usually happens once every 11 years if you go back and look historically, somewhere around there. We're a little late on that now. So that's why I say I'm hopeful that there's something coming around the corner, because, just the cycle of this is due here. But that being said, as far as business is concerned, the businesses took it on the chin for quite a while. The recorded music business, if you look at the total music business, it hasn't. But the recorded music business in the United States anyway is down 85% in total revenue off its peak in 2000. So that's quite a bit, but it's coming back, and it's coming back relatively fast. And all of the projections are saying that it may not hit the level that it did at one point in time, but it's going to come back where it's going to be a lot better. One of the things that, when you look at things, is, okay, so the total revenue pie grows. How much of that actually comes back to the artists and the bands and songwriters? And that's been a perpetual problem, right back to the beginning of time, where there's always been a middleman that's taking the majority of that. That hasn't changed. I wish it would. For a little point in time there, it looked like that might happen when we had a big do-it-yourself movement, which is still big. But the major labels and the major publishers have regained their equilibrium, so to speak. And they're more in charge than they have been in a while. And there was a time where everybody was kind of hopeful that that whole part of the business was going to change in a big way, and it hasn't changed the way many had hoped. Again, I'm not so sure if that's a bad thing. I'm one of those that looks at major record labels as a necessary evil. You need them. And you need them because only they have the infrastructure to make someone into a superstar. You can't do it by yourself. DIY stars can be made, but not superstars. The infrastructure is just too great to remake. The wheel is too big. You can't do it. And as a result, you need that infrastructure that only a major label can provide. So they serve as a necessary piece of the recorded music environment. One of the big problems, though, is they extract a huge price. But there are artists that figure out how to get around that as well. Again, with hits comes power, so you can do a certain number of things. But if you have hits before, at least even minor hits, before you hit the major labels, before you sign that deal, then you have a certain amount of power at your disposal. And there's a lot of artists that have done that have actually made out extremely well. And that's the way you have to look at the new music business. You have to look at it as, I'm going to control it as much as I can. And at a certain point, I'm going to bring the heavy hitters in, and hopefully they'll be at my command rather than the other way around, at my control. So if an artist looks at things like that, and obviously you have to have the music to back it up, and we'll just assume that that's the case. But if an artist looks at it like that, then it's a great time to be alive. You can make more money than you ever had, you never could.
And there are going to be aspiring musicians listening to this. What would your best advice be to them in terms of adopting a mindset to the new music industry with your experience? Well,
first of all, let's not forget about the music, because in order for any of this to work, any of this strategy to work, you have to have music that lots of people really want to hear. You have to have a brand, and musicians always, their eyes glaze over when you mention brand, but we're all brands in one way or the other. You have to have a brand that people want to buy. And assuming that that's all the case, the amount of power that you potentially have is great. Now, how does it start? Well, the easiest way to get it is on social media. And YouTube is the biggest way to get it right now, followed by any social media network that kind of floats your boat. The biggest being Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. And Twitter's flattening a little bit, but those right there. There may be others that you find are interesting to certain elements of your fan base, and then you might want to go there. But that's number one. You have to control that part. You have to get views, and you have to and listens and streams, and you have to get lots of them. One of the things that I find that has changed considerably is the qualification of a million. And let me explain that. Once upon a time, if you sold 1 million of anything, that was a big deal. Million's a lot, right? So if you sold 1 million albums or 1 million singles or 1 million downloads, that was a lot, and you can make some real money. But in the world we live in now, the online world we live in, 1 million is just barely getting you into the game. 1 million is nothing. At 50 million, you kind of have a minor hit. A minor, I say, at 50 million. So in other words, if you have a video up there that has 50 million views on it, yeah, that's getting people's attention. But maybe even at 10 million, you sort of get people's attention, but it's not a hit. So it takes a while for people to get their arms around that, what 1 million actually means. 1 million is sort of just getting you in the game, but not really. When you look at real hits have hundreds of millions of streams, hundreds of millions of followers, hundreds of millions of views. It's on that scale. So we're thinking, no longer in terms of 1 million, we're thinking in terms of 100 million. So you have to get your arms around that first. And once you do, then it kind of puts it all into perspective. It means, I just got 30,000 views, but it's 30,000 views. It seems like a lot, and it is, but in the grand scheme of things, you're not going up against Katy Perry tomorrow. So, that's the number one thing. You have to cultivate your fan base. You really have to do it, one fan at a time. It takes a while. If it happens overnight, you're almost in trouble, because it turns out that, success is inverse proportional to how long it took you to get there. The longer it took you, generally speaking, the longer your career is going to be. If it happens overnight, it generally means that you're going to be a flash in the pan. Not always, but usually, because you can't sustain that amount of excitement. But if you've done it over the long haul, if you've done it over a period of years, then chances are you have a very strong fan base that's going to stick with you for a while. So the biggest thing is develop that fan base, develop it. Just remember, success doesn't happen quickly. It's just like anything else. It takes time. It takes work. Let's face it, when it all comes down to this business, if you're in it to be famous, you're in it for the wrong reason. You're probably not going to be. If you're in it because you love the business, you love the music, you love what you're doing, you love your fans, then all that stuff is probably incidental. You're just doing it because it's so cool. You're getting off on it. And wow, I'm making money at the same time from doing this? They're giving me money? If that's your attitude, then you're in a good place, I think. You know what I'm saying, Rob?
Yeah, that's a fabulous answer. It's really interesting to hear it that way. And those numbers are big. They're big numbers.
Yeah, but it's the reality of the situation, though. It's so easy to get caught up in this one way or the other, thinking that, a million is huge. Yes, it's certainly a lot, but it hardly gets on anybody's radar. If you were to go to a record label and say, I got 1 million views on this, they'll go, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. Call us back, when you got 2. If you go and you have, we get 10 million, their ears perk up a little bit. And if you have 50 million, they know about you already. You don't have to go there and say, I got 50 million. They're calling you. So most of us are still in the mindset of 1 million gets us over the top. It gets us in the game, and that's about it.
So it really comes back down to what you were saying earlier about working on the craft, working on the art.
Yeah, you sure better like what you're doing, love what you're doing, because none of this is fast. None of it's overnight. When I think of someone being in this for the fame of it, I kind of think of American Idol or those shows, because they're certainly not about the artist as much as about, wow, I'm a celebrity, to me anyway, because you see so few people that break out of that, especially lately. I mean, in the beginning of that whole genre, we had some people that broke out. It doesn't happen that often anymore because it's coming from a different mindset. It's not coming from the mindset of an artist. It's coming from the mindset of someone that's looking for fame. Might as well be an actor if you want to do that.
Who's been your biggest inspiration along the way in your career?
It's varied because I have technical inspirations and I have business inspirations and musical inspirations. So it's quite varied. I'll tell you one that comes to mind right off, and someone that not many people know of, and this is on a technical level, but it's kind of a good story. And Tomlinson Holman, is a big inspiration to me. He was a mentor in surround sound mixing, especially. Everybody knows Tom Holman, but they don't know him. When you go to a movie and you say THX, it stands for Tom Holman Experiment. Tom was the chief scientist at Lucasfilm, and he came up with THX. And THX was just a way of calibrating movie theaters so it sounded the same in every movie theater. That's basically all that is. But, he developed that for Lucasfilm. And now he is the head of audio direction at Apple. So he's responsible for a lot of things that happen that we use every day and aren't aware of. But he was a mentor of mine. And I'll tell you, this just gives you an example. When I first started to do surround sound mixing, there were not many other people doing it. They were doing it for film, not for music. And there was a problem with calibration. How do you calibrate things? And I went to a conference once, and I brought this up, and I was met with derision by all sorts of people from a panel, people from everywhere. I mean, they were looking at me saying, what do you mean? It's easy to do. I'm saying, no, there's no easy way to do this in a music studio. And Tom came up and he introduced himself to me afterwards. The only guy to do this. And here's the guy that's responsible. The term 5.1, he came up with that. That's his idea, 5.1. That's his design. So here's a guy that's responsible for surround sound as we know it today that comes up to me and says, okay, I think I get what you're saying, and let's see if we can work on this. But everybody else was completely down on me saying, oh, what do you mean? Sure, we have, but Tom got it. And, of course, he became a deep mentor and a friend ever since. But there's people like that in everyone's lives. I think the thing is, when those moments happen, you have to be aware of, because sometimes they go by fast. And if you're not aware of the opportunity, you kind of miss it. And luckily, I didn't miss it in his case. And it really meant a lot to me because it changed my life in a lot of different ways. It got me a lot of work that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I worked with some huge artists and huge albums. As a result, it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that conversation. So I should tell him this sometimes, because I don't even think he realizes this, and I don't think I ever expressed it to him, and I probably should. But there are these people that are huge inspirations to you that happen along the way. So he's just one of them.
That's a great story. Is there a specific piece of work that you're most proud of as a musician or as a writer?
It's always been the last one. Most recent one. I'm just finishing up the latest version of the Music 4.0 book. It's going to be Music 4.1. And, I was reading through it the the other night and going, oh, this is pretty good. So there's that one. The album that just went to number 2 on the Billboard Blues charts, that was pretty cool. That was by Adriana Marie and her Blues Cutters, Double Crossing Blues, and that was kind of special. There's another one that I did with Mick Taylor and Jerry Groom in 1991 or something. I think that was up for a Grammy as well. That was Once in a Blue Moon. And that was special. That was one of those times when you just know that there's something special happening. And you feel it, and everybody feels it, and everybody knows it's going down. And if you're cognizant enough, you know to write it out. Not change anything, just write it. So, luckily there are more really good things than bad things, and though there's been some of those too.
Yeah, sure. If Bobby today could go back and give advice to the Bobby growing up, what would he say?
Practice more.
And what do you mean by that?
I would get better in my instrument, a lot better than I was. I would have worked harder. And in my defense, I have to say, when I grew up in a little town, Minersville, Pennsylvania, 5,000 people, might as well have been a million years away from the music business. It wasn't close. And when I was at the age when I was looking for someone to help me, when I really could have soaked it up, there was nobody available. And there was no means to go get it. There was no internet or anything like that. So I couldn't get it at the time. But back when I moved to Los Angeles, at that point, there was a lot of possibilities that I could have tapped into and that I didn't. And I'm really sorry about that because, again, it could have changed my life. The other thing is I would have been a bass player.
What is it about bass playing?
I've come to find later in life, doing it just kind of on a lark, that it's a huge amount of fun. And there's a huge amount of power in it because the groove is set by the drummer, but the whole feel is set by the bass player. Mm-hmm. And again, there's a huge amount of power involved. God, I don't want to sound like I'm power hungry at all. But it's a lot of fun that I didn't have as a keyboard player, or as a guitar player. And I probably would have worked more, to be honest with you, because there's always a need for bass players. It probably would have changed my life, and maybe not in a good way if I would have done that. But, when I go back and I kind of look at it, it's like, oh yeah, I probably wish I would have done that back then.
What are you most excited about and looking forward to in your work today?
I'm doing these online video courses. I have 2 out now. One is called 101 Mixing Tricks, Big Studio Tricks for the Small Studio. And the other is Music Prosperity Breakthrough, which is kind of like a music industry coaching course to get to the next level. And those have been a huge amount of fun, not only to put together, but to market and to also administrate. And I say that because it's something that's constant. There's new muscles that I'm developing all the time. And that's always fun, learn something new all the time. And I'm interacting with people in a way that I haven't in a long time either, where there's people that seem to be very thankful to the information, and they're always asking questions. And I feel like I'm always helping somebody on some level. And boy, there's no better feeling than that. So if I were to look in my life and say, I always felt best when I was helping someone some way or the other, and now it seems to be happening more. So that's a good thing. So I'm in the middle of doing a few more of these courses. One I'm publishing, 2 outside the industry actually. And it's just turning into yet another thing that I do that I find, again, fascinating at the time, new muscles being used. So that's what I'm excited about. I stopped writing for a year, and I thought, I'm not going to do any more books because what else do I have to write on? And second of all, I don't need any more credits. I have 24 books already. It's not like number 25 is going to help my credit list or anything, help my credibility. It was time to go back and do a couple of revisions, one on the Music Producer's Handbook and another one on Music 4.0 book. And I have to say, when I get back to writing, I was like, wow, why did I stop this? This is a lot of fun. This is something I really enjoy. I really like doing, and I should find a way to do more. Let me say something else, Rob. I have to say, and I really want to make this clear. When I write these books, there's the commercial motive, of course, the personal motive of learning something new. So every book I write, it's usually because there's something I want to learn, and this is the easiest way for me to find out, and I hope that other people want to learn the same thing. But I've also now looked at it from an historical perspective as well. When I do these interviews that are included in the books, I'm trying to make sure that there's a place for all this kind of industrial information that we have, so it doesn't just kind of dissolve into the ether. And there's a lot of things that have changed. Like in the studio business, for instance, the way we work is completely different. So it's nice to capture the way we used to work so people at least can read about that. Or the difference between, it used to be if the way you started in the business is you started as a second engineer, an assistant engineer, and you learned you mentored under a number of other engineers, and then you moved up. Well, there's so few places that do that anymore, so that's kind of changed as well. So it's, again, I'm trying to historically capture this information so at least people can read about it and go, oh, that's the way they used to do it, and that was kind of cool, or that wasn't, or boy, I'm glad we do it this way this year. So that's a real big thing for me. I do want to capture this information from a historical perspective. And I hope that people understand. I hope they like reading those interviews, because I've been pressured from publishers to actually do away with them. And in some cases it makes sense, and in some cases it doesn't. I mean, they're trying to lower the page count on books because it's cheaper. But I've always looked at it like, wow, well, that's a good formula that kind of works, and people like it. And if they didn't like it, the books wouldn't sell. So do you like those interviews?
I absolutely love them, yeah. For me, it's actually easy reading. So I can use the books as reference material for when I'm working on audio. But what I love about the interviews is I'll pick up the book just for the sheer inspiration and just to see what producers and engineers have to say. And they've all got such very different approaches, which fascinates me.
Yeah, me too. Originally when I did the first book, what it was is I knew all these mixers, so I went and I interviewed them, and I was just doing it for background information. And when I transcribed everything, I looked at it and I thought, this is really interesting stuff. I like reading this. I bet some other people would too. And that's why I included them, and it became kind of a formula for all my other books, most of them anyway. So I still feel that there's some value to it. For me, it's fun because I like talking to people about their method, just like what you're doing. There's always something new that you learn, and I just hope that other people find it as fun and appealing as I do. The other thing is, I think it also teaches you that there's no one way to do things, because these are all successful people, and they've all been successful in slightly different manners. So when you look at it that way, you go, oh, okay, wait a second. Okay, so-and-so did it this way, and that's what I've always heard was good, but this one didn't do it that way, did it another way, and it worked that way. So what it does is sort of gives you some confidence that even if you're not on the path that seems to be the most followed, it's still not a bad thing.
You mentioned earlier that you're updating Music 4.0 to 4.1. What were the biggest changes that you saw from Music 3.0 to Music 4.0?
Oh, the biggest thing has been streaming, of course, finally becoming mainstream. It was YouTube and then becoming the major source of music discovery, and in many ways being the entree for streaming, because people got used to getting their music that way. But streaming is now, it's almost everywhere. Everybody's doing it in some level, and if they're not, they're going to be soon. The only question is if they're going to pay for it and how much they're going to pay. So, and that comes down to not what the consumer wants, unfortunately. That's more of a licensing issue with the record labels, what they're willing to finally settle for. And right now they're not settling for anything other than $9.95, which is a bad thing. The growth of streaming, I just saw plateaued. And there was a survey that went out to people that said, okay, so why aren't you streaming? Or why aren't you paying for it? Some people said, it's too much. And then another portion of the people said, I don't think I'll use it enough. And then when they asked people, well, how many of you are going to sign up for subscription in the next, I'm talking about paid subscription, in the next year, 78% said no. So that's bad, and it's because of the price point. The price point is wrong. Everybody has said this. I mean, every industry pundit, advocate, you name it, everyone says, you got this wrong. It's twice as much as it should be, and things would just explode if it was $3.99, $4.99, and the labels won't go for it. And to some degree, the artists won't either. The artists are kind of blinded by all this and don't understand the economics of the situation. So they won't go for it either. But this would, just lowering that price it wouldn't double. It would probably quadruple the number of people that were on board. So there'd be a lot more money coming in.
Yeah, almost lowering it to a point where you don't think too much about it in terms of the value that you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's just it. At $3.99, you'd go, it's only $3.99. So I only listened an hour that last month. That was only $3.99. At $10, £10, whatever it is, you think a little differently. There's some price resistance there. You go, I wasted that. So, that's what we're up against right now. To many people, publishing is this mysterious black art, and it is to a certain degree, and it's very complicated. And I'd really like to try to make it less complicated and make people understand more about publishing, more about why it's important, why it's a big source of income for a lot of people, why it's going to stay that way for a long time, and how to get the most out of it, especially when it comes to streaming, because, boy, it's so complicated. There are so many different aspects of publishing having to do with streaming and just how people get paid that no wonder there's so much misinformation out there. And I'll give you a good example. We've all read the disgruntled artist post that said, well, I had 3 million streams on Spotify last month or Pandora, and all I got was $38. And you see enough people saying this, and you go, wow, this is really bad. There's not any money being made. When you delve into it, you find, wait, there's a lot of money being made, and there's a lot of checks that came out of it. This was just one of them that the artist saw, but didn't see the other 6 or 8 or whatever. This might have been the lowest one. Or they're talking about a tune that maybe there's 5 writers on, so, of course, they only got $38 after a month. Or there's a lot of fingers in the pie ahead of them. So there's actually a whole bunch of money that was made. Maybe there was $1,600 that got made, but there's that middleman that made most of it, and the artist wound up with $38. So there's so much misunderstanding in this, and this is one of the things I'm trying to clear up. A lot of it is in the new version of Music 4.0 as well, the version that will be out in January. So I tried to actually put a sampling of that and a lot of examples of how this works in that book as well. But this course, and I think that'll be January too till we get it out. Hopefully that will remove some of the mystique around publishing and around especially streaming royalties.
I'm incredibly grateful for your time today, Bobby. Thank you. What are you most grateful for today?
I'm certainly grateful that I still have my health. I have a lot of friends that have fallen by the wayside because they don't. I have some friends that are miserable because they're not feeling well. So when I look at that, I think, wow, I'm happy that I'm feeling pretty good today. So that's one thing. The other thing I'm happy for is that I'm still working and having fun doing it. Because once again, I have a lot of contemporaries, a lot of friends that are not having fun in the business. They're burnt out. They want to get out of it. They want to do something else. They can't. So I'm thankful that I have those other opportunities. So those are the big things that I'm very thankful for.
Thank you for sharing those. Finally, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, the easiest way is just go to BobbyOwsinski.com, BobbyOwsinski.com. And everything else, all my blogs, Forbes posts, video courses, lynda.com courses, books, all the other things can be found through that. So that's the easiest thing. I write 2 blogs every weekday, one on the music industry. It's the Music 3.0 blog. Another one on music production, which is my big picture blog. And then once or twice a week on Forbes as well. And that's big picture stuff on the music business. So there's always a lot of information coming out. So much so I can't remember what it is a lot of times. I'll have people come up to me and say, oh, that article that you wrote. And I'll go, oh, did I write that?
That's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Bobby.
My pleasure, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes where you can rate and review the show. Your review is the best way for other people to find us. I might even give you a mention. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.